So, I always say so, doesn't it? I've tried to discipline myself not to say so. This is Easter Sunday, and I've just had a nice meal. So it's after sundown now. Not that that makes any difference, but of course tomorrow Jesus would be raised from the dead, according to the customs of Christendom's dating system. Not entirely correct, but that doesn't matter. The thoughts are that millions of Christians will be thinking about Jesus going to Easter Monday Mass and services, and they'll be thinking about Jesus raised from the dead. Now this particular video is devoted to the wealth of Jehovah's Witnesses, because some say they've got all this money, so those men in the smart suits, the governing body that appear on the JW broadcasting, they are loaded, you know. They're living the life of, I don't know, Riley. They've got obviously all these fancy new buildings. I've been to one of them. One was built in Chelmsford around about 2019, and they've got this fabulous new headquarters, and it is worth a lot of money. I don't know how much. So recruited for Jehovah and used for profit. So how did they build these buildings? So firstly, I'm going to deal with how they build the buildings and how they save money. And secondly, about the kind of wealth Jehovah's Witnesses have, or assets and wealth, total wealth, in comparison to other religions. Well, particularly the Anglican Church and the Catholic Church, since the Catholic Church has the most priests in the world and experts in religion that include theologians, those in nunneries, monks, Vatican City. So there are all those people representing them and teaching biblical truth. Now, in the case of the Catholic Church, Catholic dogma. And that they are around about 500,000, and Jehovah's Witnesses have over 9 million preachers of the good news. So you can imagine the preaching effects and the difference between Jehovah's Witnesses and the other religions, especially since the Catholics are the biggest. And so that the money comparison is an interesting one. But before that, so when they're building a new headquarters, because they've got a new headquarters in Germany, Britain, America, they're now building a new huge studio complex, and they've had extensive building works all around the world. Jehovah's Witnesses always seem to be on a massive expansion drive. So the question is really all these beautiful resources. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a couple of videos in the top, just showing you how nice these headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses are, but also some experiences of those who were involved in the building. Now they're really worth looking at. One of the videos is actually about the builders who did the building, and they were amazed by the number of women builders working on the site. I've seen some of this myself, because when I was going on the tour, they still had diggers driving around. There's all the mud, and the buildings were half up, and it's quite an amazing thing. And all the contractors were there, because Jehovah's Witnesses get in outside contractors, really well qualified ones, such as some who'd built some of the famous landmarks in London, Wembley Stadium, the Gherkin, lots of really, they're from Holland who were doing some of that, and they expressed how they felt about all these volunteers on site working for free and how happy they are. That's a marvellous thing about how happy they, you know, over 60% of the workforce was women. What a wonderful bit of women's kind of liberation, because how many times do you see a building site full of women and they're doing men's jobs? to some degree better than the experienced men, and they've gone there as volunteers. There's some marvellous experiences on that. If you want to look on this channel about that, if you go into the women's playlist, you'll see a number of fabulous experiences of witness women and how happy they are to give their time freely. There are thousands of volunteers in every country of the world, and including Britain, who spend all their time volunteering, doing these marvellous builds. And when there's for example, a disaster somewhere, lots of these volunteers are willing to travel. They do get help with their travel to get there. They'll travel to where there's been a hurricane or something, and they will help out there using the skills that they've accumulated on these builds. So the question is, are these people mugs? Are they being used, recruited, and they're mugs? Well, if you look at the joy that they've got, the happiness to serve God. Remember, Jehovah's Witnesses, a lot of them are called pioneers. What they're doing is they're spending a lot more time, and their employment side, etc., may be part-time, and they may be spending a lot of their lives volunteering, spending a lot of their free time. These would be people who are doing more preaching than the average witness. They're doing more, a lot more, and they're happy. Some of these then go on to the volunteer building schemes, which enable them to use that time in enhancing the services that Jehovah's Witnesses can provide for really everybody in that country, because they support the preaching work by all the local congregations. And of course, Jehovah's Witnesses themselves. And the organisation is like a well-oiled machine. Now, a lot of people say, well, where did you get all the money from to build that? Well, in the case of Great Britain, you see, we had dozens of buildings owned, including our own headquarters in London. Now, if you're aware of the property prices over the last 50 years, in London, they've skyrocketed. So by moving out of London and buying like a huge farm area, they've been able to relocate and unite the staff. Before, you had staff being picked up from separate houses and lodges and being driven in to the Bethel in London. Here, they're in a beautiful countryside setting, and they're all together. There's no being driven in by all these, they're not having to commute, you see. So the headquarters is run more efficiency. But of course, the money that they got from selling the buildings far exceeded the cost of building a brand new headquarters. So where did the spare money go? Well, it's gone into preaching the good news and disaster relief and assisting other countries who are building things, but they may be poorer countries, so the money goes further. So it's a marvellous scheme. So please look at the videos attached, especially about the women, because they do such a marvellous job. They're on roofs, they're plastering, they're driving some of the biggest vehicles that you can get on site. I mean, huge vehicles, the big monster trucks. You got the women driving them, and the men have admitted that the women are more conscientious at doing them than men. So it's awesome. It's an awesome experience. As Jehovah's Witnesses who aren't able to volunteer to that extent, like myself, part of me is jealous. I would love to be doing that. I did some of those volunteer things when I was younger, but not all of us can do these things. Our circumstances vary, don't they? Now, the second question. I've just had a really lovely meal tonight. Chili con carne, very nice. And I followed it with some trifle. So I'm ready to sit on the sofa and have a little doze. Anyway, look, the money, okay? Oh, they've got all this money. They're so wealthy. Well, they diversify it. Now, one point is, what are Jehovah's Witnesses worth? Around about 1.5 billion. Now remember, that is all the valuation of their land, their buildings. So that's all the valuation of all that. All the Kingdom Halls are now technically valued as part of the central Jehovah's Witness organisation. They didn't used to be, so that would have made the value higher value for the organisation. Congregations used to own their own kingdoms halls. So that has boosted the value up. So that's around about 1.5 billion. Now, to get a perspective, so the Catholics have got about 500 full-time teachers, priests, etc. Jehovah's Witnesses have got over 9 million. So there's a comparison. There's a lot more Jehovah's Witnesses acting as ministers and preaching the gospel, teaching and producing things, making videos, printing literature. And bear in mind, Jehovah's Witnesses literature is free. Hardly anybody ever contributes towards the literature. The witnesses themselves may choose to put some of their funds in, but literature is basically free. So if you want something, it's free. All the downloads and everything is free. Everything. There's no cost. So remember, those funds have to back that up as well. So the Catholic Church is believed to be valued or worth more than 30 billion. It's 30 billion plus. It's probably, massively more. But the Church of England, that's the Anglican Church in Great Britain, Northern Ireland, is worth around about 10.4 billion. And so in comparison, you've got Jehovah's Witnesses at 1.5. But that is total assets, remember, everything. And that's... so, really, I've been into the offices of Jehovah's Witnesses. And the apartments, etc., the rooms, the apartments, they're all the same. So if you're someone you'd consider high up in the organisation, you get the same accommodation that a lad coming in as a volunteer gets. You're not getting superior accommodation. If you look at those who are doing, on the broadcast, doing the talks, if you look at them carefully, you'll see that their suits aren't Savile Row or, designer sunglasses, etc. They really don't have that money. They have the same allowance as everybody else. It isn't a two-tier system. I know the ex-JW community go on about, it's just not true. I've sat in the offices in front of the one in charge of looking after the British branch, for example. I'm sure I had more money than he did, and at the time I was about 24. My wife and I went to see him, and he got this little card file out because we wanted to move somewhere where the need was greater. That's going somewhere where there's a greater need for preachers. And he got the cards out and said, would you like to go there or there? Would they suit you? So they're just the same as us. In fact, most Jehovah's Witness families have probably got more money in the bank and more assets than the men being looked after at the branch office. They are, remember, full-time volunteers. They do it because they love God and they're trying to love their neighbour. Anyway, thank you very much. Take care. I'll probably put my feet up now for a while and watch some of the snooker. Now, I don't know if you get snooker in the US. But it's quite a big sport in Europe and Britain, and I'm fond of that, so that's nice. Anyway, take care, and see you again.